Hi, welcome to Christy's Book Corner. I'm your host, Christy Mason, and this month's book is called The Finding Jacob Wetterling. It's a true case, and it did happen a long time ago, as you will find out when we read it. And the first chapter is called The Ride Home. I flashed the flashlight at him. He told me to turn it off. I thought it was a joke. I kept thinking somebody else was going to jump out at us. That's what Trevor Wetterling says, Jacob's brother. The weather forecast for Sunday, October 22nd, 1989, promised a beautiful seasonably warm day. Jerry Wetterling had spent a little time on Saturday evening planning a Sunday of family events. He talked to his boys about heading to the lake in the morning to do some fishing. It would probably be the last good opportunity of the fall season. Jacob, 11, was the oldest son, and was the fisherman of the family. He agreed to plan from the start. Younger brother Trevor, 10, opted to sleep instead. Patty Wetterling, mother of the 4 children, planned to stay home with 8-year-old Carmen, the youngest. Amy, 13, was away at a friend's house. As predicted, the weather was glorious. This book is hard to read. The early morning sun peeked from the autumn-leaved trees that turned the Wetterling home. The temperature was already well into the 40s and was climbing quickly. Jerry was the first one awake that morning. He ventured out to a 4-mile jog while the rest of the family slept. It was a chiropractor in St. Joseph, a budding small town just west of St. Cloud. An avid sport fan, Jerry was active and athletic. He turned from his run to find Jacob eagerly waiting in the kitchen, already dressed for fishing with his equipment sitting by the garage door. They ate a light breakfast, loaded up their gear into the family boat, and made the ride to near Big Fish Lake. It was a 25-minute drive to the lake, which was located a couple miles north of the communities of Gold Spring and Richmond. The fish weren't biting at the otherwise perfect day on the lake. The quiet October morning was filled with all the spoilings of the summer. As noon approached, they decided it was not their lucky day, and packed up to leave. Jerry and Jacob were avid Minnesota Vikings fans. Kickoff for the game against the Detroit Lions was at 12 p.m., so they hustled home to watch it. Jacob was especially excited about the Vikings' prospects that season. The team had just acquired running back Herschel Walker via trade from the Dallas Cowboys. The Vikings had been playing well lately after a poor start to the season, and were hoping to extend their winning streak to 4 games that afternoon. Once home, Jerry and Jacob joined Trevor in the living room to watch the game. Walker played well once again, and soon the team had very comfortable lead. Jacob and Trevor, both hockey players, decided to forego part of the second half and put in some extra practice time on the ice rink. Jacob had recently switched from his familiar goalie position to one using regular hockey skates, and he was struggling with the transition. Jerry loaded the hockey gear into the car and drove the boys to the municipal ice arena in St. Cloud. Oh, that's his hockey jacket. Sorry. Hockey was extremely popular in Minnesota. There was hockey and then there was other sports. Although the season was already underway in St. Joseph and the surrounding communities, there were few skaters at the rink that day. Most people were outside enjoying the weather. The Wetterling took advantage of the light crowd and skated hard. Jacob was still uncomfortable with the switch from goalie skates to regular, struggled somewhat. After they returned home, Jerry told the boys there were still some daylight out remaining for the quick game of OD, or offense defense. Jerry was the all-time quarterback in the made-up game. Jacob and Trevor took turns playing wide receiver and defensive back, essentially making two one-man teams. The boys adopted a special rule to help even things out between Trevor and the older. More physically, Jacob had 3 downs to score a touchdown, while Trevor was allowed 5 downs. Jacob, again, this book, oh my god. Jacob, ever the compassionate big brother, would sometimes throw the game in Trevor's off favor. As evening approached, Jacob called his best friend Aaron Larson and asked him to come over. The pair had been inseparable since shortly after Larson moved to St. Joseph. They had played together on the same football, baseball, soccer, and hockey teams for as long as they could remember. But their 6th grade schedules had them in different classes and practice times, and they rarely saw each other at school. The next day, Monday, was an in-service day for teachers. No school for the boys meant Aaron could stay overnight. Aaron's parents agreed to make the short trip to drop him off. Oh, so it's a PD day. That's why. I'm like, it's a Sunday. Why would they have no school on the Monday? That's why. Okay, I said that confused me. There was much of interest on television that night. One of the networks featured a movie titled "Do You Know the Muffin Man?" The plot involved a man who muzzled a young boy. Jerry and Patty had been invited to I don't like that word. I'm not explaining what it means either. Jerry and Patty had been invited to a party near Clearwater that Sunday evening. They had deliberate whether or not to attend, and at the last minute decided they would go. Clearwater was a 15-mile, 20-minute drive southeast of St. Joseph. The party was a celebrate to Maelstrom Art Festival that had been a recent successful event in St. Joseph. Patty was the chairperson. The party doubled as a housewarming for the hosts, who had recently moved to Clearwater. Since Amy was away at a friend's house, Jacob was left in charge of minding Trevor and his younger sister Carmen. Patty ordered pizza delivery for the kids and left for the party with Jerry. She phoned him home when they arrived at their friend's house and gave Jacob the phone number for the party's host. He was to call if any problems came up. After sharing the pizza, the boys soon became bored. They decided to bike into town to rent a movie at the Tom Thumb convenience store. But Jacob knew they would need to get permission from his parents first. Knowing that his mother would be a hard sell, he devised a plan to gain her approval. He phoned their next-door neighbor, Raquel Jerzak, and asked her if she would watch Carmen while the boys biked into town. Raquel agreed. Next, Jacob tracked down a flashlight. He checked the batteries to make sure they were good for the trip to town and back. The boys sorted out their transportation options. Jacob would ride his mother's 10-speed. Aaron would push the scooter while Trevor ride his own bike. Jacob had put together a sound plan. The boys elected Trevor to make the call to the parents. After a brief discussion with Trevor to make Patty denied their request. Although the boys had biked the route many times, they had never been tripped at. They made the trip at night. She suggested they might have been lucky asking their father, but offered no guarantee of success. A short time later, Jacob decided to make a second call. this time asking for his father. After hearing Jacob's plan, Jerry gave his approval. He understood that Jacob had been going through a tough time lately, and thought that allowing him to pursue a big bit of an adventure might give him an emotional boost. Jerry did, however, insist that the boys wear reflective clothing, like stuff. Jacob understood and agreed. Raquel came over to the Wetterlings to watch Carmen, and so the boys headed off shortly after 8:30 p.m. Trevor held the flashlight and led the way. Aaron and Jacob trailed just behind him. All three boys loved sports and silly comedies. They had already decided on the film they would rent, the baseball comedy Major League, before they rounded the turn northward onto 91st Avenue. The Wetterling home was one of the handfuls situated on one of the two quiet cul-de-sacs at the end of 91st. The 1-mile stretch was dead-end Ritchell Road. There was only one way into town. There was only one way to anywhere. This is a long chapter. I didn't realize how long this was. It was especially dark outside. That fall evening. There was no moon, not a star in sight. There was no street lights. The boys rode into tight groups so all could benefit from the single flashlight. They had reflective vests on so any passing cars could see them. But they anticipated little traffic on the long dead-end road. Desolate but smoothly paved 91st Street Avenue. Today it's called 16th Avenue. Ran straight northward into town. The route started with a long, gentle climb to the top of the hill, marking roughly the halfway point to town. Then an easy downhill ride. Then a few more blocks to Tom Thumb. There were just two houses on the stretch of the road leading up to the crest of the hill, one on either side of the road. The house was on the right east side and was the home of Robert and Rita Reiser. There probably was a large farmstead with a long gravel roadway that led to a few hundred yards, particularly from 91st Avenue, then bent northward around a pile of firewood, and down a gentle hill on the other side of the large patch of thick woods and underbrush. The farmstead included a large home nestled along the east side of the wooded area, as well as several architectural outer buildings surrounding the end of the driveway. In daylight, the house and all but two of the buildings were shielded from street view, but the hill and the thick wooded area. At night, none of the property's buildings were visible from the road. The other house was a couple hundred yards further up the hill. On the left, Urban Schiffer's modest home sat just 100 feet or so back from the road. The area in front of the residence was wide open to the road, with a well-maintained garden alongside the house. A small patch of woods lay from a point just south of the garden, or 100 yards or so to the west. Past the garden, the wooded stretched to the north, anchoring around the west side of the home. The only other homes on 91st Street were over the hill. There the quiet countryside met the southern edge of St. Joseph. The homes in town were close to one another, forming traditional city blocks. As the boys rode up the hill and neared the first driveway, Aaron thought he heard a noise in the field on their left-hand side, opposite of the driveway. He briefly glanced in that direction, but was unable to see anything at all in the blackness. Aaron wasn't able to identify the source of the noise, and it sounded to him like something that shouldn't be there. He was curious about the noise, but shrugged it off and kept it to himself. He didn't want to frighten young Trevor. They continued over the hill toward town. On their way, one car passed them on northbound, and then they met a couple of cars that were heading south on 91st. As they came into town, they made a right turn on East Baker Street, followed it for a couple of blocks, then turned left toward the destination. They parked their bikes just outside Tom Thumb entrance and went inside. They made their way to the video racks and were dismayed to see the vacant video slot where Major League would have should have been. The boys settled on the slapstick comedy Naked Gun instead, even though Trevor had seen it several times before. They grabbed the videotape and then darted out to the candy aisle. The female store clerk, a local college student familiar to the boys, asked Jacob to sign out the videotape. Then when the boys left the store, it was a few minutes after 9. They got back on their bikes and started for home. The hill was steeper southbound on 91st, but after a few minutes they reached the crest. It was an easy ride the rest of the way home. They were just starting down the hill when a man suddenly jumped out from a driveway in front of them. "Stop!" the man shouted in a deep, commanding voice. "I have a gun." The boys skidded to a stop. Trevor insistently pointed his flashlight at the man. Catching a brief glimpse of him, he saw that the flash of a silver gun into the man's hand. Trevor could see that the man was wearing gloves and a dark mask, like a woman's stocking, with a little ball on the back of his head. He was dressed in dark clothing and a big, dark, puffy coat. Everything about the man was dark. The first thought that crossed Trevor's mind was that it was just a joke being played by someone from the neighborhood. He almost started to laugh out loud. The same thought crossed Aaron's mind. "Shut off that light," the man barked in deep, raspy voice. Trevor switched off the flashlight. The man ordered the boys to throw their bikes down in the ditch. The boys offered the man the videotape, but he angrily struck into the ground. The boys then did as they were told, dropping their candy on the grass around the area of the bikes. Next, the man ordered them to lie in the grass, on their bellies. Again, they did as they were told. The man asked the boys their age. They blurted their age in unison, one at a time. He rolled clearly agitated. Trevor stated that he was 10. The man then ordered him to get up and run to the woods to the west. "Don't look back, or I'll shoot," he threatened. Trevor did as he was told. Next, Aaron said he was 11. Then Jacob also said he was 11. The man looked at their faces. Then he groped Aaron in the genital area. "Oh my God, that's terrible!" with his hands over his clothing. The masked man then gave Aaron the same direction he had given Trevor, to run to the woods. "Don't look back, or I'll shoot," the masked man warned once again. The man grabbed Jacob from the ditch by the arm and pulled him toward the gravel driveway that led to the east. As Aaron ran into the woods to the west, he quickly caught up with Trevor. They stopped briefly to look back, but saw nothing. Jacob and the man were gone. The boys ran all the way back to the Wetterling home. Aaron was faster than Trevor, but he matched Trevor's pace so he wouldn't leave him behind. After a half-mile run through a field, they finally reached the house. Panicked and gasping for breath, they told Raquel what had just happened. She called home and asked her father, Morale, to come over right away. Morale Jerzak, yeah, that's how you say it, rushed from next door and instantly noted the horror on the boys' faces. They were white as ghosts and sweating. He saw that Jacob was not there. The boys told him what had happened, and he called 911 to report Jacob's kidnapping. It was 9:32. He was still on the phone with the dispatcher when the first sheriff's deputy arrived at the Wetterling home at 9:45 p.m. When the masked man stopped the boys on their ride home that night, they could have had no idea what would happen next. Change their lives forever. It would change their families' lives and their friends' lives. What happened that night brought the tiny town of St. Joseph, Minnesota, to its knees in shock. No one believed something like this would ever happen here. No one knew that what would follow would become the largest search investigation in the history of the state of Minnesota. It became a mystery that gripped the community, the state, and the nation. The kidnapping of Jacob Wetterling brought to the forefront of public mind the realization that what happened that night in St. Joseph's could happen anywhere. Ooh. Oh, tomorrow will be chapter 2. Oh, thank you so much for watching. Ooh, what an intense story. I wouldn't recommend reading this if you're older. I am 27, so I can read this, but if you're young, probably an age restriction, maybe 16 or 15. Alright, thank you so much for watching, and remember to subscribe, comment, and like, and dare to dream. Bye, guys!